There seems to be an awful lot of sad stories in the news today, and there are thousands missing. Does anybody care? New Daybell channel, where we talk about those faces. Talking news with Debbie. Cassie Barnes has still not been found, and it's been 2 years since her case first hit the spotlight. Breaking. Chad Daybell and Vallow both behind bars. Sarah Galloway was found. She wasn't found alive. What happened to Sarah Galloway?
It's too heartbreaking to share.
Children are still missing. Children like Dorsey. You're in shame. You just got away with it. Welcome to Talking News. Hello everyone. My name is Debbie. We use big stories to push little faces.
Hello everyone, welcome to Chasing a Murder Talking News. Before we get started, so that you can help this channel out, push the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, hit the notification bell if you would like notifications whenever we have new uploads. And I know guys, I hope everyone here had a beautiful Thanksgiving. I know we've been busy, have a whole lot going on, and I'm struggling to actually get a video out lately. But here we go. I'm working on Life Beyond the Grave, Part 30, on the Lori Vallow case. So we left off with Lori Vallow and Joseph Ryan continuing their struggles and their fight over Tylee Ryan. And this has to do with child support and anything you can think of. But something I felt like I left out, and that is the fact that Lori and them, her brother, and a few other people involved, unnamed, are stalking Joseph Ryan after he picks up Tylee Ryan. He calls the police, but the police say there's really not much they can do. Their hands are tied, and more struggles continue in the courts. But the courts are they're starting to figure out that Joseph Ryan might not be as bad as Lori portrays him to be, because everything she accuses him of, well, they can't find evidence to support that. There's only one thing that Joseph Ryan is really in trouble for, and that is for drinking. He gets a DUI. Tylee Ryan is sick, as we have learned through this series. A lot of people are suspicious as to why Tylee Ryan's so sick. Does it have any connection to any kind of, flags attached to Lori Vallow, her mother? So a lot of these child support arrangements and child custody problems that are going on in Maricopa County, which is in Arizona, guys, the court battle actually goes on until around 2014, when it appears that Joseph Ryan wins his case. Around this timeline, Chad Daybell is putting out several books, a lot of them having to do with the New Jerusalem or Zion. He claims that this is going to happen in the near future. At this time, he suspects that all of this New Jerusalem is going to happen in Independence, Jackson County, Missouri. Also during this time, Chad is hired as a sexton once again. This is in Springville. Chad Daybell spent much of his life between Utah, Odin, and Spanish Fort, and he's starting to push his near-death experiences, which are 2 of them, later will lead to 3, saying that his spirit has left his body. This experience actually left him with gifts, and these gifts were to deliver messages from the saints, the leaders, Jesus Christ from heaven, or the celestial world. His visions have become quite prominent, and he understands that he has the gift to see in the future. It's very important that he's able to relate to those visions and some of his books as fiction. This is so that he's not kicked out of his LDS church. So around May of 2013, he's working as a cemetery sexton in Springville, And before he resigns in October of 2014, he has some very interesting experiences. And Chad says many people are curious as to why he wants to do this job. And I believe one of those reasons is so that he can get these ideas and to be able to have time to write his books. But not only that, is I believe he does have some type of morbid desire. And this is based off of some of these experiences he has and the things that he sees. Chad says, quote, "There are always questions about how someone gets into this line of work, but I enjoy it a lot. It has given me some pretty unique stories about cemeteries," end quote. And at an unknown date, at some point when he's working at the cemetery, he shares in one of his books that some people choose to be cremated before having their ashes buried in a family plot. Chad says, "I don't mind, since the size of the hole is much smaller." He says he can actually dig these plots by hand. Then he throws in his expertise of what cremated remains are like. He says one misconception is that cremation, Chad states in that book that one misconception is that cremation is nothing but pure ashes, like the kind you would find in a fireplace. He says, actually, the cremation process isn't that pure. He says, "I found out this fact the hard way. The first several cremations I buried had arrived in nice, solid boxes that weighed about 10 to 15 pounds. I would just put the box in the ground and fill the hole. But one day, he writes that one family dropped off a lady's cremated remains and requested that her ashes be placed in the same box as her deceased husband. The family members claim that there would be plenty of room to do this. And after the family left, they said they would be back in a few hours. This is so that they could do a small service." Chad says at that point, he goes to the area where this lady's husband lied. He dug down and he found that original box. He said there was no way that the second box would fit inside that box. Chad knew that this family was going to be back soon. He said he wanted to honor their wishes, so he popped open that second box. Then he pulls out these cremated remains, which were contained in a sturdy plastic bag. Chad said that he couldn't help but to examine the contents in this bag. He said that he noticed that there were some ashes, but there were also some shards of bone and a few teeth. He guessed that these things didn't burn well. He then takes and opens the first box and molded the wife's remains around the husband's plastic bag the best he could. Then he closed the lid. He said then he couldn't help but thinking about Resurrection Day and how this would be very complicated for those two since they were cremated. So it's really important that you understand his thought process here. Here he's concerned about the Resurrection Day and how they would return. Not only that, he says that it could look like a game of Twister. So he believes that these contents are going to get mixed up and they're not going to be able to resurrect correctly. Chad is thinking about the resurrection and what should be a joyous event. It's really not too complex, but Chad envisions something kind of strange. The resurrection is once Christ returns, everyone who has passed away will rise up from the graves. And for Chad, these cremated remains are not, he's trying to look at it scientifically how that would happen. And it's very vivid. So him imagining how that's going to happen, a bit morbid if you really think about it. You really do need to remember this incident with Chad Daybell when we move into 2019. I've mentioned this before as well, that Chad Daybell does have a sensitive side, or it appears to have a sensitive side, for babies who have passed on. That is important to note as well, because children seem to be off limits when it comes to thinking of the morbid thoughts. But in 2019, what happens? But, Chad opening this plastic bag and going through these remains just really kind of raised a flag, for me anyways. Now remember, his oldest daughter, around October 13th, she's a missionary. But around that time, she's starting to feel very sick. She writes in her blog. She says she got these strange ulcer-like sores in her throat, and she felt very weak. She said that her mission's president, the wife, insisted that she go to the doctor. She went and got a blood test, and it indicated that she had a very nasty bacteria that causes walking pneumonia. She's prescribed an antibiotic, and she says she starts feeling a little better about a week later. She says she felt grateful that they caught it early because she could have ended up in a hospital. She quotes, "I would hate to have to go home early due to an illness," end quote. Just the thought of that made me shudder, she says. She loved her mission. At one point, she's still having trouble. Her partner is also not feeling well. And her parents' insurance didn't cover out-of-state care. This is important to note. They said so they tried to be strategic. In other words, to manipulate the situation to work for them. November was filled with going to strange doctors, supplemented with priesthood blessings of healing. And she said she really hated to read the letters or write letters to her parents because she knew they would want to know she was feeling better, but she just slowly kept feeling more and more ill. And this put her into a depression. She finds out, long story short, guys, that she has what you call mono or kissing disease. She's battling anemia. The illness persists. She can't seem to get over it. So around December of 2013, Emma returns back home from her mission. Chad says when he got off the plane, he sees his daughter. She looked pale and deathly ill. It takes her a long while to heal. We also learned around this time that J.J. Vallow was born. He's not with his parents, he's with his grandparents. But Charles and Lori Vallow are thinking about adopting JJ. Around the same time, Lori Vallow is attending church pretty faithfully, and this is where she meets a woman by the name of Christina Atwood. Christina is in the same ward as Lori at this time. She says at this point in her life, she really doesn't know Lori Vallow all that well, and she actually says that it's her husband and her boys that have come to know Lori and seem to like her quite a bit. It's really not until a little bit later when Lori heads to Hawaii, which we'll go over, that she gets to know Lori a little bit more. But it's interesting because Lori seems to be bonding pretty well with their husbands and their sons. Everything that we've heard about Lori so far, her relationship seems to go a little bit deeper with males, whether they be adults or young men. Relationship with women, it's kind of iffy at times. Not going to go into the background of Christina, but just know her name because it's going to show up in 2018 and 2019, even 2020. But at this time in her life, she says she doesn't know Lori all that well. Now, let's move forward a little bit. Let's talk about Julie Rowe. Around this time in the timeline, Julie Rowe says that she's hearing voices. One of those voices being Jesus Christ. And she's able to communicate personally with Jesus. She says that the voice says, "I'm Jesus. I'm your friend. At this point in Julie Rowe's life, she's starting to get more involved with the internet community attached to the LGS and people who have had near-death experiences. And we'll mention this several times. Websites like Daybell, for example, are one of the places that actually make it possible for people like Julie Rowe and Chad Daybell, Suzanne Friedman, and many more to meet and actually share those experiences. In fact, in 2015, Chad Daybell will write in his blog claiming that he had visions of a tall, dark-headed woman sharing her near-death experience with him, and that he actually come across Julie Rowe in a preparedness website. This vision was supposedly back in 2006. He said in January 2014, he was checking this preparedness website when he saw a post by a woman named Julie Rowe. He said she felt as though she would share her near-death experience. Julie Rowe was on the website asking if anyone knew someone who might be able to help publish that experience. Chad said after reading that, he thought, well, of course, it's him that could help her. And so he sends her a basic email explaining that he was the president of the Spring Creek Book company that he and his wife runs. So again, he said they continued to exchange a couple of emails. Then he called her to make the conversation easier. He said he still didn't know what she looked like, but he recognized the distinctive voice. She had a Facebook page at the time, and I looked up her photo after we talked. It was the tall, dark-haired woman I had seen. So she and Chad start working on the manuscript, and it came together quite rapidly, he said, even though she lived in Arizona and that he was in Utah at the time. The book that they're working on is called A Greater Tomorrow, and it was released mid-May. Chad mentions it's about mid-July that he actually gets to meet Julie. Do you guys want to guess where they meet at? And this is important that you know this. BYU. So here he meets Julie Rowe at the same college in the same areas that he has taken several other women to. It you'll see in the future. So Chad seems to like to meet these women at the BYU Bean Museum. He says their families meet there this time. Later that same week, Julie spoke in the Logan Tabernacle to several hundred people. He said as he sat near her on the stand while she addressed the crowd, the vision was filled, and that he had seen many years earlier. Remember, about around 2006. So Chad truly believes that when he's watching Julie speak at the podium, that he believes that this is his vision coming true. Later, he asked Julie what she had seen as far as the future. So mark this, guy, it's around 2014 that Chad says that she's kind of hesitant to say very much, which is not the Julie we know. Chad said he actually took this as a good sign. If she intended to deceive me, she would have the whole scenario already laid out. So a lot of times when he's dealing with his book his authors that will publish through his company, he's always worried that they're trying to deceive him and that he's this special guy that can figure out whether or not they're lying or they're truthful. And again, he mentions as they concluded the conversation, he was definitely sure that this was a tall, dark-haired woman he had seen in the vision years earlier. He says he certainly wasn't going to tell Julie that. It's at this point that he decides that he needs to say a prayer about whether or not they're supposed to publish this experience. This is something he says he does with all his authors. Chad says that he gets a strong confirmation about her, but he proceeds cautiously anyways. He contacts Julie again and tells her that he needs a solid first draft before he could send her a contract. Julie agreed, and over the next few days, she put together an outline and a manuscript. He says that they also discussed her book and what it would be an additional witness to what the prophets and the apostles had taught, and not to contradict their statements. And Julie agreed with him. An interesting topic is where they discuss the LDS Church and the president, and how that Julie actually tells him that she fully supported the president of the LDS. She also mentions that she is a lifelong active church member. At this point, he decided he'd offer her a publishing contract. They worked together on expanding the book and making enough pages in order to publish a complete book. As they worked on these later chapters, he says that Julie had the burden of reliving horrors of her seeing, the future troubles and destruction ahead. Chad mentions that this emotionally kind of wore her down, but she pushed forward with it. They actually purposely left out descriptions and graphics on these details. The book is completed and then finally published. This book will end up being one of Chad Daybell's top sellers through his book publishing company. Something you will learn is Julie Rowe during this time is learning more about energy healing. And pretty soon in the near future, she'll start starting her own classes to teach people how to get in tune with this energy healing. And Chad Daybell will take an interest in this as well. Alright guys, so I'm going to end it right here. So we're slowly moving in deeper and getting to some very interesting topics. In fact, we're going to learn a lot more about Julie Rowe and how Julie Rowe's ideas and his ideas of the future actually play off of one another. They kind of merge, they play off of one another, and they seem to be a good team. Before we go, I want to tell everybody out there, thank you so much to those of you that have subscribed and liked and commented. I really do love you guys. I appreciate everything you have done. So lucky to have you here with us. And let's not forget about these girls here who continue to be missing. Their stories are sometimes forgotten about. One reason is many of them have kind of gone cold. They're on halt until they get a new tip. Hope you all are having a wonderful holiday. Love you guys very much. Don't forget, you can donate to my Patreon page if you like this channel, you like the videos I put out. Alright guys, y'all have a good one, and I'll see you guys soon.